So what's the best way to train for climbing big mountains? And more specifically, what sort of duration and what sort of intensity do you need to be able to sustain
to have a reasonable chance of getting to the top of Mont Blanc? Keep watching to find out. Okay, let's stop. Good morning, John at Mont Blanc Guides here. I'm sitting outside the Chabot hut at 2,750 metres, and we've got a team up here. We're just about to set off to climb Grand Paradiso, which is the big 4,000 metre peak just behind me here. And if you've seen part one of our Fitness for Climbing Mountains videos, you'll know hopefully what sort of level you need to get to have a reasonable chance of success on a big alpine peak like this. So in this video, what I want to do is talk about what I consider to be the essential elements that I think you need to include in your training to really give yourself the best chance of being properly prepared. So a quick disclaimer before we start: I can't give you a detailed training plan, I'm afraid, nice though that would be. Firstly, because I'm not qualified to do that. And secondly, because I don't know who I'm talking to, and I don't know what age you are, what physiology you are, I don't know what sort of training you like to do, and I don't know what sort of things are available to you where you live. Some of you might live near good cycling ground, some of you might be gym based. I really don't know. So it's up to you to try and adapt whatever you like doing to the sort of efforts that I'm going to show you here in order to not be surprised when you get out here and start climbing these mountains. So we're just setting off now, and you can see that we're not moving very fast, but we're probably going to keep going like this for about an hour before we stop. And straight away you can hear I'm having to breathe a bit and talk at the same time. It's not totally comfortable. So that's the sort of effort you've got to reproduce and hold. Doesn't really matter how you do it, for about an hour. So even though we're moving pretty steadily, don't be fooled into thinking that the best way to prepare for this is to go for a few stiffish hikes. This is much more relating to running, jogging, cycling than it is to walking. We're up here at altitude, we've got a bit of weight on our backs, and we've got to keep this going for quite a while. So you really need to get your heart rate up into that level where, like me, you can talk, but it's not particularly comfortable to do it. So we are at 3,600 meters now. The team are doing really, really well. We've just done an effort of about an hour, if not slightly more, which is the hard thing. And people feel like, you know, you want to drink halfway up, you want something to eat, but you can't stop every 5 minutes, obviously. So you've got to try and get your training so you're used to doing these big hour long and a bit efforts without stopping, so that when you get out here, it doesn't come as too much of a shock to the system.
So this is the first important point to take on board then. Though you always see us walking on these videos, we're on awkward ground, we're carrying rucksacks, and we're working at altitude, which makes it much, much harder. And to replicate this extra effort in your training is going to need more than just normal hiking. Focus on things like running, whether that's indoors or out, any form of cycling, or if you're lucky enough to have some big hills around you, steep uphill hiking. It's the only way you're going to be able to reproduce the intensity of working at altitude in the big mountains. So those are the types of training activity to go for then. What about session duration and session intensity? Well, we've talked about how we typically go for an hour or an hour and a half without stopping in the mountains. So you need to do the same thing in your training with similar session lengths of at least an hour, and preferably an hour and a half or longer, in one solid block and without stopping. How often you do this is up to you and depends on how tired you feel, but typically more than 2 or 3 times a week tends to start to be counterproductive. As for intensity, there are 2 easily accessible ways to measure this. One is using RPE, or rate of perceived exertion, which is this scale here, and typically you want to be aiming for level 6, level 7, where you're short of breath and can just about speak a sentence. The more precise way is to use a heart rate monitor. Now, to do this, you first need to establish your maximum heart rate by doing an all-out effort, and then subsequently you tend to work at around 80% of this, and this should get you to roughly the right intensity. Now, as I said at the start, please bear in mind I'm not a fitness professional. This is very much rule of thumb advice, and if you do have the chance to speak to a fitness coach or someone like that, definitely take their advice over mine. But as a general rule, these are the sorts of durations and intensities we work at out here, and so that's what you need to aim at in your training. Just gone 5:30, just about to start the main event now, Mont Blanc, and we will see what the effort's like and give you an idea of what you need to train for. So let's see how we get on. So this is what you've got to train for, folks. We're now half an hour above Goutte. We're something like coming up on 4,000 meters, so altitude starts to be an effect. And it's just hours of this, and you've just got to find a way. Obviously no one has this in their back garden, but anything where you're just in that uncomfortable zone where, you know, you can hear me, I'm having a bit of a trouble talking, but I can just about do it. That's where you want to be, and hold that effort for an hour, hour and a half, and get used to doing that, because that's what you're going to have to do up here. So Marcel, what did you do for training?
A lot of cycling, a bit of walking. I live in the Netherlands, it's flat. I work in Amsterdam, 40 kilometers ride, so I did a lot of commuting on my road bike to work and back, 80 kilometers a day.
Yeah, that's a lot.
A couple days a week. I did some interval training on those rides.
Okay.
A couple long rides. My longest ride was 300k. Nice and easy.
Okay, that is quite a lot, to be fair. You don't have to do 300k. So John and Marcel made the summit. Hurrah! There he is, there's the proof. Hard work, eh?
Really hard work.
So if you're thinking of doing the training, how much training?
I could easily have done a bit more, then it would make this summit a bit easier.
But you were very fast, you were very, very fast indeed. So well done. We're going to set off down now. After now. So sorry about the rubbish sound at the end there. I'm afraid my camera froze up on the summit of Mont Blanc. But it's worth pointing out that Marcel was very, very quick to the summit, one of the quickest we've had all year. And doing 300k rides is not something that you necessarily need to aim for. You don't have to go quite that far. So let me just summarise what I think of as the main points for climbing a mountain like Mont Blanc. Firstly, you see us walking on these videos, but we're carrying rucksacks, we're walking on difficult ground, and in some cases there's only half the oxygen available that there would be at sea level. So you can't think about hiking as just a sole means of training. You've got to think about running, you've got to think about cycling, you've got to up the intensity if you're going to reproduce at sea level what you're going to experience at altitude. Aim for sessions of at least an hour, or preferably about an hour and a half of continuous effort where you're in that zone where it's fairly difficult to talk. If you're not suffering a bit, you're probably not doing it right. Next point, setting benchmarks is often a good thing to do and can be very motivating. See how long it takes to run a certain distance or climb a certain height, mark it in a diary, and then keep trying to improve it. Make sure to do also what you need to do rather than what you like doing. It's great if you're into yoga, Pilates, or lifting big weights, but none of that's going to help much on Mont Blanc. Endurance is what it's all about, and that needs to be 100% of your focus. Something else to bear in mind is look after your back and your knees. If you're new to running, it can be pretty hard on your body, especially when you start out. And if you do use a bit of weight to increase the intensity when you're hiking uphill, try and use rocks that you can drop off at the top so you don't have to carry them back down. Definitely take professional advice if it's available. I'll say it one more time, I'm not a professional coach, so take their word over mine. But remember, you can't offload responsibility onto them. You had to do the work at the end of the day, and motivation in the training phase is going to be much more important than motivation on the day of the climb. And finally, and possibly most importantly, don't forget how essential it is to lose any extra kilos that you can. If you've seen our previous video on training, you'll know what I'm talking about here, but it really does make all the difference. So whatever else you do, don't neglect that. So there you are then. If you're joining us on Mont Blanc this year, good luck with your training, give it everything you've got, and we'll see you in the summer. Try and enjoy it, and remember, if you don't suffer in your training, you're going to suffer on the mountain.
Bye for now.